Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go, man. Hunt the ball. Let's go, family on 3. 1, 2, 3, family.
Hello, football family. Welcome into Huddle It Up Films NFL Draft Barbecue. That's big board questions. Special day for me. First time on the channel with somebody I admire's work so much. I watches work a lot. Send him DMs, bug him all the time. And I'm glad that he put MC up there because that's how, Michael, that's how I call you. That's what I call you. I refer to you as MC. But Mr. Michael Crawford joining the program. Michael, how are you? And if you could, please tell people where they can find your work here at the beginning.
I'm doing great, Jason. Hey, I appreciate you having me on. I think this is going to be a really fun conversation. I shortened it to MC. Michael Crawford, apparently a pretty common name out there in the world. So I tried to do something a little bit different with the Twitter handle and everything. In terms of where people can find work, let's see. We got the Deep Cover podcast that I do with Chris Aguilera, who you've had on a couple times, and Kerry Stevenson. You can find us on Twitter at Deep Cover Pod. You can just search Deep Cover Podcast on YouTube. And this past season, started another show with Denard Melton called The Fire Zone Show. So he's at The Fire Zone Show on Twitter. And then again, you can just search it on YouTube, The Fire Zone Show. So I've kind of transitioned into just trying to help other people who want to put out content or do different things. I mean, I want to say maybe, 8-9 years ago, I was more into kind of doing my own stuff. But as I get a little bit older, I kind of slow down on some of that stuff with family and kids and stuff like that going on. I said, well, I can still, kind of put some time aside to help out other people. I maybe can't do as much of my own stuff anymore, but I can kind of help out some others. And I've actually found that to be like super rewarding. Like it's really cool to like see these other folks kind of get out there and do their own thing. I mean, I helped Cole Jackson start that Two Guys Watching Football channel. And then, you've seen where he's taken that. So it's been fun to do that.
A lot of similarities there. First of all, I'm a Jason Smith. So when it comes to Gen X names, you can't get more common than Jason Smith, Michael. So I don't feel any pity on the Michael Crawford. But yes, the same kind of things though, Michael. Like I'm really defensive or, oh man, this guy's doing better than me with numbers. That's just not my style, man. I'm an older guy. We come from pretty much the same generation. I noticed that we have a lot of the same taste in music and shows, Chappelle Show, to name one. But yeah, man, with the older you get, the perspective just becomes so much better on life. And, as you get more settled as an adult, and I love helping people and watching them grow. And yes, all the great things, all your links will be below for everybody to check out. But we have a more important question, Michael, before we get to football. We're having a barbecue here, MC. So I want to know what MC's plan of attack is at a barbecue. If you're either hosting one or going to one, what's your personality like? What are you eating? Are you dancing? Music. I'm hoping your music is the thing for you because we got the same taste in music. Paint me the picture, MC. I can't wait to hear it.
Yeah, well, man, it does kind of change a little bit depending on whether you're hosting or you're a guest. Because, if you're a host, at least for me, when I'm hosting stuff, I want people to have everything, right? I want the vibe to be good. I want the food, obviously. I should start with that. Food, first and foremost, I want that to be good. Whatever people are drinking, whether, you alcoholic or non-alcoholic, whatever your preference, want everybody to have that. And just to feel comfortable. So, I probably get a little, my wife would certainly tell you this, I probably go a little bit overboard when I'm hosting, buy too much food, buy too much to drink, try to set things up a little bit too much. She's like, hey, people can figure that out. Don't worry about all of that. But, I want everybody to come there and just be like, hey, I had a great time. I didn't have to really do anything. I could just be myself and just kind of enjoy everything. So definitely probably go a little overboard from the host role as a guest. Yeah, man, let's see. I'm probably, if it's coming off the grill, I'm probably eating a little bit of everything. Like it doesn't really matter what it is. It could be pork, it could be beef, it could be chicken. I'm allergic to seafood. It's the only reason I don't eat seafood.
Oh man,
I probably would. But yeah, I know that's crazy. I grew up in Florida too, so it's super crazy. But yeah, pretty much anything that you can put on the grill, I'm gonna eat. I'm definitely gonna have a cup in my hand. I'm definitely gonna have some music going on, probably a little bit of old school. Yeah, there you go. You got the red solo. You know what time it is. So probably gonna have some old school R&B going on. Depending on the crowd, we get into a little hip hop. If that's my wheelhouse, but I understand it ain't for everybody. So it depends on the situation. But yeah, that's probably how I would answer that. Keep it chill, keep it chill. Want everybody to have a good time, eat your fill, uh, and just enjoy it. I mean, barbecues are supposed to be fun, right? It's kind of thing where everybody's kind of just messing around, shooting the what, dancing around, kids running around playing. So I love it, man. It's really kind of like my spring and summer, my favorite time of year. And then who doesn't love a barbecue?
That's what I'm saying, man. Who doesn't love a barbecue? And then who doesn't love an NFL draft? Loving the setup, by the way. I mean, I think I'm pretty fly with my Ravens banner behind me. You look like Commissioner Goodell back there with the NFL draft insignia. A nicer version, a more friendly version of Commissioner Goodell, but a commissioner and a boss all itself. So kick us off, MC. You've seen my big board. You got the access, man. Who do you like on this board? Who would you like to talk about first, sir?
Well, there's a lot of guys to like. You have so many of the guys that I think are really good looking prospects, but try to narrow it down to a handful of guys. And so I wanted to start us off with Zion Johnson, interior offensive lineman from Boston College. A guy who I can tell, you have an affinity for as well. He was one of the first guys that I watched. The last couple of years, what I've tried to do is like focus on offensive line and defensive line. I try to watch everybody when I first started doing this years ago. It's hard to watch everybody and come away with something meaningful, right, from doing it. So I'd say the last two and a half years, I've really kind of like zeroed in on O-line and D-line. And I tend to start with the Senior Bowl guys and the Shrine Game guys, just because, if you look at the Ravens history, they tend to take a lot of guys from those games. So he was, obviously at the Senior Bowl, one of the first guys that I watched. And I was like, man, I just kept, clipping plays, like saving plays from this guy. Cause I was like, man, I like this play. Here's why I like this play. Here's why I like that play. And at the end of a game, I was like, look at all of these plays I have. I must have really liked this guy. But you probably know some of this, but I like to do background, as you probably have seen on Twitter. I love to learn about people's backstory and stuff like that.
Yes, sir. It's important. It's important.
What he actually does on the field. But local guy from Bowie, Maryland. So that's, for the Maryland, viewers out there, you may be familiar with Riverdale Baptist High School. That's where he went. Obviously played football there, but was also on the golf team. Not something you see a lot with football prospects, being on the golf team. But as somebody who pretends to be a golfer, I appreciate that. Didn't actually start playing football until his senior year in high school. And, played that senior year. Started out at Davidson before Boston College, played 2 years at Davidson before transferring to Boston College, and played left guard there. I probably played, I don't want to just narrow it to that. He was on the interior. He might have played both guard spots, but very run heavy scheme there. I think they were like in an option scheme at the time that he was there. Did very well there. I want to say after his sophomore season was like first team in their conference. Ended up transferring to Boston College, and very timely too. Like, smart guy. I'll talk a little bit about his what he studied at Boston College. So he's a smart guy. But it was right around the time that Boston College had just graduated like 4 guys on the offensive line to the NFL. So it was a really good time to transfer. You could come in. There's going to be some opportunity for you to earn a role. And he did. So it was computer science in undergrad. He's currently in grad school, majoring in cybersecurity. So, really smart dude. Played a couple different spots at BC. Played left guard 2019 and 2021. Played left tackle in 2020 because they had a need there for a year. So he stepped out there. Talked about him being at the Senior Bowl. By all accounts, he played really well that week. Took some snaps at center, and he said that he had never played center in a game. He'd taken some snaps in practice in college, but had never actually played in a game. But obviously teams wanted to get a look at him doing that, and he did it there. And by all accounts, he did really well. So very accomplished guy, man. 29 starts at BC, 19 starts at Davidson. So that's 48 total. So experienced guy. Was at the combine. He's, very similar to another guy that we're going to talk about later in terms of their measurements. 6'2", 312 pounds, almost 11-inch hands, like 10 and a half, 34-inch arms. Pretty good RAS. I think it was like 9.56 RAS because he ran like a 5.5 140. Good solid 3-cone 7.38 short subtle 4.46. Good vert, good broad jump, good solid stuff for an offensive lineman, interior type offensive lineman. So just in terms of the background and the measurable stuff, I think all of that stuff bodes really well for him as a prospect. So I'll stop there. I know I throw a lot of words at people, so I'll stop there before I say anything about how he did on the field.
I'm loving it. And I had kind of a similar experience as you, as far as the more I liked him, the more I watched him, the more I liked him. I mean, I liked him when I saw him on tape. I started to fall in love with him when at the Senior Bowl. And then at the Combine, you mentioned the way he moves. You could really see that better in the field drills that they were doing, because I might have to remove the center from his where I rank him on the board. You can see there, guys, I have him at number 19, right in that range of players that I predict will go in the first round. But the reason I'm thinking about removing the center label from him, Michael, is because I think he's just too darn good to play center. I think that as a guard, he can be dominant in the NFL, and you would rather showcase his skills there instead of at center. I mean, I love the fact that, his mind's smart on and off the field. Like you mentioned, that transfer to BC was right on time. It was a good move for him. And then, of course, you mentioned his studies, his willingness to try center at the biggest tryout of his life at that point, the Senior Bowl. So there's just like, when the information starts piling up, Michael, on me, and everything is just screaming positive, 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 and then you get to set eyes on him in the Combine setting. And I'm not looking at his 40 time or other stuff that tends to get overrated. I'm just looking at his mentality, the way he moves, and I add that to the tape I saw where he was moving people, Michael. I mean, this isn't an undersized center just because he can move really well. He can do both. He can move people and he can move himself. So I love people movers, and I love people that can move on the offensive line. It's something that I think the Ravens could do a better job incorporating. DaCosta said today, reiterated, I don't know if you heard it yet, but that they like big people at every position. That's fine and all, but if you get a big person, he should be able to move people on that interior O-line. That's my personal preference. It's like, we got to get a balance here between power and movement skills to run the most diverse scheme that we possibly can. So I wanted to ask you about do you agree with me as far as like, maybe I should just take that center off of his next to his name there and just call him a guard, because he's going to be a very good NFL guard.
Yeah, I agree that there's probably more value in him playing guard for teams. But, I don't think it's a bad thing to say that he can do both, right? I think that's a good problem to have. I think if you draft him and you get him on your team and you're like, well, we're going to play him at guard. If you have a need at center, we're going to play him at center. I think it's a good problem to have. And I think he's a guy who could come in at either of those spots, or really I should say either guard too, whether right or left, and play really well for you. Or if you did have a need at center and say, hey, we're going to start him out here because, if you look at the Ravens situation, for those who, how people are about Patrick McCarry, for those who don't feel like Patrick McCarry can be or should be the starting center, if you brought a guy like Zion in, then, you'd at least have that option, right? If you wanted to give him a look at center. So now I could see why you would want to do that and say, hey, let's just put him at guard where, there's going to be maybe a little bit more value in terms of what guards do and what they're asked to do in the offense as opposed to a center, especially if you say, hey, well, we've got McCarry, we've got Tristan Colon. So let's put this guy, over at guard. But then, of course, people are going to say, well, you're going to throw him in that mix with Ben Cleveland and Tyree Phillips and stuff like that. Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Throw him in that mix. And, it's a 3 dogs, 1 bone situation. Like Mike T likes to say up there in Pittsburgh, you see who comes out of it. Right. So, no, I wouldn't blame you for doing that. I just think he does give, he gives you a good problem to have, right? You talk about problems and people typically see those as negatives, but he gives you a good problem to have because, like you said, this is a guy that moves people. I mean, talked about Davidson playing in an option style run game. When he came to BC, they were a big 12 personnel, 2 tight end team. So they like to run the ball with heavy bodies and heavy personnel. So he's played a bunch in run heavy schemes. And so when I watched him, I just said, look, if you look at the way that this guy moves, like he's really efficient with his footwork. I think he does really good things in terms of using his feet to help him gain an advantage, right? He's not necessarily somebody who, it's a different position, but let's say if you looked at a guy like Tyler Linderbaum, and everybody knows he's super mobile for a center and, you know, really good in like a zone scheme. I'm not saying that Zion couldn't play in a zone scheme, but he's not that same level of mobility. But I don't think he has to be because of how good he is with his feet and how efficient he is with his feet. I remember a coach saying once that angles beat speed. Right, angles beat speed. If you're really efficient and you're smart and you know where you're trying to get and you take an efficient path to get there, you can beat a guy who's faster than you in terms of getting to that same spot. So I think he was really good with that. Really good with his hands. You know, not just a guy who's, you know, just going to get his hands on you and his hands just go dead. He's always kind of working for leverage and good placement and control with his hands. We already talked about the mobility, and I think he has that finisher's mentality, which you love to see in offensive linemen, right? We're not going to stop blocking until the play is over.
I mean, all these guys have some kind of projection, or maybe people will perceive it as a knock. But with Zion Johnson, he's just so clean of a prospect, and a guy that I believe in so much, not only from a upside, a ceiling perspective, but also a floor perspective. That's why, I mean, it's hard to make, you know, it that high on my particular board if you're an interior O lineman just because of positional value. You see both him and Kenyon Green are guys that I just look at and say, man, I don't care what else we have on the team. There's going to be a point when they're just the best player on the board. They're going to help Lamar. They're going to help the O-line. I don't really can't concern myself with need at that point or who else is around them. Just give me Zion Johnson on this team, and I know he's going to be, well, I'm really confident he's going to be a good piece, you know, and I think some team is going to get him for 5 years and get him in the first round, Michael. So we covered him a lot. Who else is sticking out? You got any other favorites of mine that you want to talk about, or somebody off the board? Where are you going to go here?
So we'll stick on the O-line. I think this guy is going to project to the interior of the O-line, even though just he played some tackle. He played all over, really. But that's Dylan Parham from Memphis, who's played some tackle, who's played some guard. He's another guy who, again, when I watched him, just started clipping a bunch of plays just because his movement was so efficient. I think the first game that really caught my attention actually wasn't even from this season. It was from last season against Cincinnati, and he went up against Myjai Sanders a lot because he was at right tackle in that game. And I was like, this was Myjai. You know, people said he had a little bit of a down season this year, and I think some of that's because he started getting extra attention from offenses. But 2020, you know, he was really, you know, still on a heater, and he had a really good battle with Parham. You know, I would say, you know, I know depending on who you ask, and certainly if you ask the players, I would say Parham, you know, sort of got the better of it that game. And just a guy who could do a little bit of everything. Now, he looked small to me, though. So I'm looking at him at right tackle, and I'm like, man, this dude looks small. And so I went to Memphis's website just to see what they listed him at. And they listed him at like 6'2", 285. I was like, this guy can't be 285 playing tackle. I was like, this is not possible. And it did turn out that
Chris mentioned that, by the way. Chris mentioned that. He said, why would you do that to your player? First of all, list them that low. But I just don't believe it, because there's no way you can tell me that he was 285 in December or whenever his season ended, and then bam, here 2 months later, he's 30 pounds heavier at the combine. Like, it seems, and because he looked good, Michael. It wasn't like he was sitting down eating chips and junk food. I mean, he looked like he's carrying this weight well and he's moving well. But yes, Chris and I talked about the same thing. Like, that was a disservice. I'm sorry I interrupt, but I can't believe that Memphis, you know, listed him that low as a weight.
No, you're right. It didn't make any sense. It had to be a typo, because I think even at the Senior Bowl, he was like 311, 312. And then I would say the combine, he was 311. So, yeah, I don't think – I mean, guys do put on or cut weight depending on, you know, how the things that they're trying to perform at the combine. You know, if they want to run fast, they tend to cut weight. If people think they're a little undersized, they'll put on some pounds to show that they're not. But I don't think that was his case. I think it was just a typo in his case. But he was a guy that you can see the movement, and why he moves so fluidly and so efficiently is because he played defense in high school. He didn't transfer to offense until his senior year of high school, and he didn't even play on the O-line. Well, he played tight end, and they basically said he was a blocking tight end. So he was playing on the O-line. He just wasn't listed as an offensive lineman. And so he didn't move from tight end to the O-line until his redshirt freshman year at Memphis. And then once he got there, it was just like, hey, this guy's so good and so versatile that we can pretty much put him wherever we want. So he played left guard for 2 years. He played right tackle for a year. He was supposed to play center going into 2020. He had actually been playing at center in spring practice, but then they had a need at right tackle. So then he goes out and he plays right tackle. He's played right guard. I mean, the guy just, kind of played all over the place, but was really good. Ended up winning, I think it was this past year where he was first team all AAC. Could have been 2022. But just a really versatile guy. Also a guy who was at the Senior Bowl, took snaps at center there. Of course, I just mentioned he had played it before. And then if you think back, people who like yourself follows college football, they'll remember Memphis. They've had some good backs come out of there last couple of years. Darrell Henderson, that was Dylan Parham's, I think it was his redshirt freshman season back in 2018. So he was blocking on that line where the school put up like records. They literally set records for like total offensive yards, total rushing yards. So he was a part of a really good line there. And 51 starts at Memphis is a lot of games.
It's productive too, man. It's productive. And I like the way I don't want to gloss over the fact that he's got this pure football player in him, Michael. Like MC, you can see it. Like I could see him, you move somebody to right tackle, to guard. He played tight end. He played offense. I mean, this guy pretty much, it tells you something about how the coaches feel about him. And the fact that he can just move and transition, unselfish nature, pick up right tackle for a season when the team needs it. You love all that stuff. And yes, Parham, I got him number 61 on my board. So very high grade for a center. I put center by him because that's the need. And I feel like he could fill that from, Harbaugh might not want to throw him to the fire week 1. But if you get a Dylan Parham in like the 3rd round, you could depend on him being able to pick up slack somewhere on that line, somewhere in the season. And for me, I would say, okay, maybe he shows enough to where you can free up McCary to be that 6th man. And by like the second, I don't know, I would say the 2nd month of the season or week 6, week 7, week 8, like we saw with Orlando Brown Jr., where Parham just inserts himself in the lineup because he's too darn good. And for the fact that, he'll be juiced and ready for the rest of the season at the time when guys are already really beat up. So love Dylan Parham. Any other thoughts on him before we move on?
I agree with your projection at center. Even when I saw him in that first game at tackle, that's what I thought he was. I thought he'd probably end up being a center/guard. He's got some of that Patrick McCarry to him, where a guy who can line up in a bunch of different places and really kind of hold his own. Just the last thing I'll say about him on the field was one of the things that really stood out to me was just his balance and body control. He seemed to always be in control when he was moving. I didn't see him in a lot of bad body positions. Seemed to always be balanced when he was punching in pass pro or setting guys in pass pro. So like you said, just kind of a natural football player, just looked very comfortable in everything that he did, not stressed or threatened or anything, no matter who he was going against. So that really kind of stood out to me.
There you go. So Patrick McCary, for our listeners, there's a good comp to Dylan Parham, but he has a little more chops on the inside than McCary did at college. So it's not going to be a transition. It's easier to project Parham being good at center, being good at guard, unlike McCary, who kind of had to take the hard way around playing left tackle, I believe, his last season at Cal. So, Michael, do you mind if we talk some linebackers? Because nobody has brought up one of my favorite players that I keep wanting to scoot up my board. I just got, there's so many good ones, Michael, and you're not a rankings guy. I know that. So you know how hard it is for me to actually put these guys in some kind of order. And then I'll be looking at them at night and be like, no, man, you got to switch these 2 guys, or you got to put this guy higher. So Devin Lloyd, man.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say his name and leave the floor to you, because you see I have him in that green section here as another guy I think will go in the 1st round and might surprise people with how high he actually does go for a linebacker.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if he's out of that top 15. If he doesn't go before then. I think he's that good. you look at the size, right? I want to say, what was he, 6'2", somewhere in there at the combine. Long
Yes,
range,
but it
dude.
looks like he's like 6'5", like when he
Yeah,
plays.
yeah, because he's got the wingspan. Yeah, I want to. Where was he at? I'm actually looking him up right here. Yeah, 33
Okay.
inch arm, 80-28 wingspan, 6'2", 237, ran 4.66. A little bit different body type than if you think back a couple of years ago to that draft where some other inside linebackers were real early. I think it was Devin White and Devin Bush up there for the Steelers, right? Guys who were running like low, high 4.4s, but they were a little bit, I think they were both under 6 feet. So a little bit different body type. I think for him, for me, he's kind of a little bit more of that modern NFL inside linebacker. Think about a guy like Fred Warner, right? For the 49ers, kind of long, rangy guy, very good in coverage, has a very good understanding of passing concepts and what teams are trying to do. You don't often see him like taking the cheese with routes coming in front of him because he knows that, hey, if they're showing me this cheese in front of me, that's because they're trying to hit something in behind me. And that's the bigger play. So you see this guy, picking balls off, returning them, pick sixes and stuff like that. Very good against the run, gives you a little bit of a pass rush element too. He's a guy who there was a game in 2021 against USC, and it wasn't the only game, but I think that was a game where I saw him really do it a lot, where they actually lined him a lot at like DN in that game, and he was just like straight rushing and playing the run from a defensive end alignment, even though I think his best position probably is off the ball linebacker, but another one of those guys who's just a football player. It's like, hey, if we need you to do this in this game, whether it was for injury or game plan, whatever the reason was, he went in there and did it well. So, he's a guy that I mentioned, Denard Melton, the guy I do the Fire Zone show with. We did a film session on him, and we both were like, yeah, this is the dude. This is the dude right here at inside linebacker. And, Denard is a guy who played running back and linebacker. He was at JMU, and he's played both positions. I want to say he played linebacker in high school and running back in college. And I think he did a little bit of linebacker at JMU too. But so he has an affinity for the linebacker position. So, of course, somebody like him, Denard, is like, hey, I don't think 14 is too high. I take him at 14. And, other people in the fan base will say, I don't think we need to take another inside linebacker that high, positional value. I get all of that. But just in terms of the player, is he the kind of player that you could see going that high, going in that range? Absolutely. Now, whether it's something the Ravens want to do, that's a separate conversation. But if you just isolate the player and say, yeah, is this guy that good to go that high? Yeah, he definitely is, in my opinion.
Yes, me too. And my assessment, or where I have them on my board, is need based, and where I feel like the Ravens are. I don't buy a lot of the positional value stuff, Michael, because if you're telling me a guy can play 3 downs at linebacker and do it effectively, can cover effectively, can stop the run effectively, can blitz effectively, you could, like you mentioned, you could even line them up on the edge and really get creative with your packages. To me, that's worthy of the 14th pick. The reason I have him at number 22 on my board is just from a need-based position. And then I got to admit, I'm a little scarred with the draft capital that we've already invested into inside linebacker. That I feel like as a GM, you'd be setting yourself up for a lot of questions if you're not going to the Super Bowl. Well, it's because if you don't win the Super Bowl, well, look, he spent these first round draft picks on linebackers. We could have told you that. So, but I have no knock on Lloyd as a football player as well. Very clean, like I've used Zion Johnson. And when I interrupted you there, it's like he's intimidating in pass coverage from a length standpoint and an active standpoint. And he mentioned some of his just innate feel for what's going on and what the offense is trying to do. I mean, those are things that some linebackers never really develop, no matter how much film they watch or how much coaching, or it just, when you're in the heat of the battle, it's tough to apply some of that stuff. So that comes naturally to Devin Lloyd. And he's a player, Michael, I think I might have to creep up a little bit on my board. If I had to guess, I would say he's probably going to go up a few spots on my board because, I mean, I don't have anything negative to say about him. The only thing I would say is that true Mike linebackers are getting harder and harder to find. So if you're looking at somebody to absolutely be a physical beast and blow up some of the best left guards in the game, and while they tackle some of the most physical backs in the game, those guys are a dying breed as the game slowly shifts. Some people might look at Lloyd as a, more of a weak side linebacker or run and chase guy like a Patrick Queen, but I don't. I think he can handle 3-down responsibilities, take on blocks, cover the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, and in the way that teams play the game now, you got to be able to do both. You got to have guys who can play both spots. They might play a little bit more of one than the other, just because their skill set lends itself to them, being a little better at some of the things that, say, the Mike does versus what the Will does. I think we've seen that with PQ, that, he's just a natural will linebacker, right? It doesn't mean he can't play both spots. It doesn't mean he didn't play both spots. He did that throughout the year last year. But I think as the year went on, he ended up playing a little bit more on the weak side. And you could see just his natural skill set come through there at that position, because he is a run, hit, and chase dude. If you allow him to do that, he will make plays sideline to sideline. That's what he does. But yeah, with Lloyd, I agree with you. I think he can do that, but he can also kind of be that Mike and sit in the middle and get, the whole, front seven organized, get guys lined up. He's gonna make reads in the run game. He's gonna make reads in pass coverage. So I think he gives you all of that. And I don't know much about the New York Giants. I don't follow them. I don't really know their roster, but I know Wink is up there, and I know they got those 2 picks somewhat early in the first round. I'd be surprised if he gets past, if they stay at that second first round pick. I'd be surprised if he gets past Wink.
Wow. Okay. I like it. I hadn't thought of that. I haven't gotten that far in my evaluation. I'm buried in the players, but yeah, Wink, that's a great one. Wink would love Devin Lloyd. He would look at him and be like, man, anything I ask this guy to do, he's going to be able to do. I can do this, have that guy do that, have that guy do that, move this guy in. That's a good one, because Devin Lloyd can be a chess piece in what's becoming a more positionless league. Even in college football, it seems to me, Michael, like I had this comment or this conversation last night on Ravens Recap, where it's hard to find those prototypical Ravens cornerbacks who are press man coverage, because it seems like every game I watch, they're all will linebackers. They're all off cover corners. Like, it's hard. Yeah. Like, it's becoming a pure projection for each of those spots. You look at, like, I'm a McDuffie stan, as you can tell by my board. And that's the guy I'm getting the most pushback on, because people don't see him fitting into the Ravens defense. And I think he could. And I'm thinking, well, he's just not asked to do. They basically put him on the left side, let him play off coverage, and pick your poison between him and Gordon. And, so I'm a little McDuffie sidetracked. I don't want to talk about McDuffie MC, because I've McDuffied up this program enough. So can you pick us another guy to talk about?
Yeah, I like McDuffie too. So yeah, let's stop right there, because I'll jump on that train with you. Another guy I wanted to bring up, and it's a last name that Ravens fans will be familiar with, Daxton Hill, safety / corner out of Michigan. People probably know Justice Hill's brother plays on the Ravens. And, this is a guy, Daxton Hill, and I think you saw it when you saw him test at the combine. I mean, he ran 4.38. So, this guy's, a legit athlete. But, I mean, super, super high pedigree coming out of high school. I mean, 5-star guy. Was a guy who was committed to Michigan, then flipped to Alabama, then went back to Michigan. Tulsa, Oklahoma, came out of Booker T. Washington High School down there, was a Gatorade Player of the Year in 2019, number 8 ranked player in the country, number 1 ranked safety. So, I mean, you're talking about legit high school pedigree on this.
It's close to mine. Close to my high school pedigree, actually.
I didn't want to talk him up and not give you the recognition that you deserve, but I just wanted to put him out.
I was pretty good in high school, a little undersized. But yeah, Daxton Hill, man. Sorry for my dad joke in there. This guy I love, Michael. I love this guy. He reminds me of Antoine Winfield Jr. He reminds me of a Chuck Clark type with his instincts. It's just that 4.38 speed that you mentioned, MC. It shows on the field and his instincts. If you could talk about his instincts and what you don't get to see on the TV copy, and how he affects plays on the All-22.
Yeah, the cool thing about him is, like, he's another one of those guys, different position, but similar to kind of, the discussion we were having with Zion. It's like he gives you some good problems. Is he a true deep safety and you only playing back? Is he a strong safety? Is he a nickel? Is he an outside corner? Well, he did a little bit of everything. at
Yes,
Michigan.
I
He
would
had
say the answer is yes to all of the above, sir. You know,
because he had the athletic ability to do it, and he's the kind of guy who you want to use in a variety of different ways for the very reason that you just said. You want to put him in as many different positions as possible to impact the game because he has the ability to do it. So whether he was a blitzer coming off the edge or blitzer, I mean, this guy gets there in a hurry. And I remember me and Denard were watching him, and I think we were watching the Wisconsin game, and he knocked one of their quarterbacks out when he was blitzing off there. I was like, this guy is a blur coming out there. And then in coverage, has really good ball skills, really good feel for concepts, no matter where he's lined up, whether he's playing in the post, whether he's playing down and underneath intermediate zones, whether he's manned up with a guy. I mean, about the only thing that I saw teams really kind of go after him and attack him, in terms of an area was like man coverage on like putting the ball up high. I mean, he's 6 feet, so he's not a short dude. But I think they felt like, hey, that's the only area that you can really kind of go after this guy is if you match him up with like a 6'4", 6'5" dude and put the ball up high. And then, see if he can go up and get it. I mean, he had a 33-inch vert, so it's not like he can't jump. But that was like it. Like you couldn't attack him anywhere else because he was so good in coverage, whether it was man or off. Really disciplined with his eyes, really good recognition, quick trigger, like twitchy, just a super twitchy dude. And so I loved it. I mean, we both did. Me and Denard were watching this guy. We're like, look, you find a place for this guy in your defense. You're saying, well, I don't know if he's this. I don't know if he's that. Doesn't matter. You find a place for this guy in your defense because he's that good.
so MC, I had him higher on my board before we signed Marcus Williams, and I dropped him down just a little bit, but I couldn't fade him that much because, like you said, you cannot get it. Well, you alluded to it. You cannot have enough defensive backs, and he's a weapon no matter where you put him. If Marcus Williams go down, you can trust him in the post and single high. If Chuck Clark went down, you could trust him to be that do it all. A dime linebacker, you could trust him in that role. If you have a slot wide receiver that you're facing this week, there's a good chance that you could pretty much ask Dax Hill to lock him up too. So it's not just being versatile. Like that's something that Ken harps on a lot. Like, okay, well, he can do this and can do that. And sometimes that means he's not, especially good at anything. That's not the case with Dax Hill. With Daxton Hill, he is good at everything. And when that versatility comes in to speak, it should not be taken as a he can't do anything, any one thing well at an NFL level. He can do multiple things at the NFL level. And I'm going to throw it to you on this. His play demeanor also sticks out to me. He gets there in a bad mood. And he tackles, I'll use the maniac role or term when I throw it out. He's an absolute maniac when it comes to run support. Dog just digging into the pile. He's not standing around the pile. He's trying to get into the pile and see if he can come out with the ball. I mean, there's really, I love the prospects that you're picking so far, Michael, because it allows us to highlight players, and if you're in that first round prediction, they should be able to provide you multiple things, and they should have a high floor and a high ceiling. And that sums up Daxton Hill to me, Michael.
Yeah. Love his play demeanor. You talked about it. Like, you can watch it on every play, and whether he's the one actually making the tackle, like maybe somebody else makes the tackle, the guy's on the ground before he gets there, he'll come up to the pile and just thump somebody. He wants to hit somebody. He just wants people to feel him out on the field. And you see it in the run game too, when he's mixing it up with wide receivers and wide receivers are blocking him. He's like, this, you're not going to block. You're a wide receiver. You're not going to block me. It's disrespectful. You're not going to block me. So he's a guy that definitely likes to mix it up, definitely likes to get physical. And you love to see that. You love to see guys who have that kind of play demeanor, who are out there, who are like, hey, this is not just going to be 7-on-7 running around out here. You're going to feel me out here on every play. Even if I'm not the one necessarily directly involved in that play, we're going to lock up and you're going to know you're in for a long day, right? You better bring your lunch pail because this is going to be a long way out here. So I love that about him, because you look at him and, when you look at, his combine, height, weight, he's 6 foot 191, not a small dude. When you look at him on field, just his body type, he's kind of a leaner, the way, he carries his weight, kind of a leaner, rangy type frame, but that does not stop him from playing physically at all. I mean, he, like you said, he will throw it in there and stick his face in the fan with the best of them.
And I'm not a comp guy or, compared to another player, but every once in a while I have one that sticks with me. And Antoine Winfield Jr. is who I would compare Daxton Hill to. Just the instincts, Michael, the instincts to make the play. And like you said, it almost looks like when he comes up on where the guy was tackled, he's got that look in his face, and his body language tells you he's like, you're lucky my teammate tackled you, because I was like 1 second away from just absolutely, unleashing. And so, yeah, he wants to make you feel his presence. He wants to make a play. Urgency in the tackling, like you see from a Deshaun Elliott. What separates like a Deshaun Elliott as a tackler to say somebody on the team like a Geno Stone is Geno Stone wants to be in the right position in case something goes wrong where he's there. Nothing wrong with that. Deshaun Elliott, direct path. I bet you I beat you to the ball. I'm going to beat you to this ball. And that's what Daxton Hill brings you in the run defense. And, of course, he takes great angles in the passing game. You mentioned it in passing earlier, that angles beat speed. That's something that I can relate to very, very well in my limited, don't let me fool you, Michael. I'm not anything special as a football player, but I was playing free safety in high school against guys from the west side of Baltimore who looked like grown men with beards. And, I was a little bit of a late bloomer. So those angles help you, banana angling and just understanding the leverage of the field, the position. It can really allow you to make up for some things. Daxton Hill does that, Michael, but he runs a 4.38.
He's got the best of both worlds. Takes good angles and he can fly. So when you put those two things together, you can make a whole lot of plays out there on the field. And then, of course, the one thing that underlies all of this is he played for Mike Macdonald last year. And so he knows the scheme, very comfortable in the scheme. And Mike Macdonald knows a lot about him. I mean, you're not going to get any better information on a guy than, a defensive coordinator and even, another guy who the Ravens brought in from that staff, Ryan Osborne, who worked a little bit more with the pass rushers. But again, still just a guy who was on that defense, was around Daxton Hill every day. People who were a part of his recruitment. So, people that have a relationship with him and who know him as a person. Because, you and I have talked about this before. I mean, we're limited to the film, right? We're not able to get medical. We're not able to get this kind of background that teams can get. So we're limited to the film. And so our evaluations are by default always going to be incomplete because we don't have complete information. But these teams do. And I think it can give you an edge when you've got people like that in-house. I thought about that last year, and I think you saw it some last year with T. Martin and Keith Williams coming in. T was one of the, he had a reputation as being one of the best recruiters in college football. And so he had recruited Rashad Bateman. He recruited some of these other guys. So, again, you're going to get even better information from guys who, had those kind of connections and those kind of relationships. And then, like I said, with Mike Macdonald being the DC, that's a whole nother level. Right? Because that recruitment relationship kind of can be what it is for a certain period of time. And then if a guy goes to another school, then, the relationship's not quite as strong. But when they're on your team and on your defense that you coordinate and you're seeing him every day, you're in the meeting rooms, you see how he is in the training room, you see how he is in the weight room, you see how he is academically, you're going to know this guy better than almost anybody. So, whether they pull the trigger on a guy like that and where they would do it in the draft, because I think he's another guy who's probably going to go, pretty early. I don't know if it's first, or I don't think getting out of the second round for sure. I don't know if that's going to be an opportunity for the Ravens, but they're going to have everything they need in terms of knowing about him as a person if they decide they want to select him.
This draft comforts me a lot, Michael, because I've had conversations the last couple of days about my top 10 specifically and how we can maneuver to get one of those guys, because I really kind of see a tier divider between my top 10 there in the dark green and everybody after. I think that those guys are true first round grades for me. Well, that's what I gave them, true first round grades. And I think that those are guys that we should target. But if the Ravens do trade back in this draft, it would give me great excitement as well, because you look at a guy like Lloyd, who maybe I disagree with you a little bit. Maybe he goes in the around 20, or Daxton Hill or Zion Johnson, or any one of those guys that you see there in the light green. If we can get two of those in the first round, to me, that's almost equivalent to getting one of those studs up top, just because of how deep this draft is. And Michael, I want to call an audible here for our last segment, if you don't mind. We were going to talk about Sam Williams, but I wanted to ask you, Daxton Hill kind of got me thinking about his Michigan teammate. Now, my last thoughts on Daxton Hill is you mentioned all those off the field things where Mike McDonald could see his work habits and knows confident, hey, we're bringing in a pro to our system. But the second part of that is he also knows Daxton Hill played a very key role for me at Michigan, a special role. We moved him around here, there, everywhere. I either got to find a guy on this team who can do that, or I can get the guy who I already know can do that. So there's a compelling case for Daxton Hill on this team. But I wanted to ask you about his teammate, David Ajabo. And, I don't know where I'm placing him on this board. I can't even explain it to you. I just kind of see like a talent tier level where I'm like, okay, these guys will probably be as good of a pro as Ajabo, but they're completely healthy and they'll be able to play this whole year. So from the evaluation standpoint, especially MC, if you're getting a guy in the second round, you're only getting team control of him for 4 years, and the first year might be a wash. How in the heck, give me some advice here. How in the heck should I rank Ajabo on my board, or just any kind of general thoughts you have about that player himself?
Yeah, the Achilles injury at the pro days, it was, obviously unfortunate. You feel for him, terrible situation. But I think if you want to look at a silver lining standpoint, it depends on the injury and the severity of the injury and the guy and how he rehabs and how quickly he heals. One guy that I looked at when I thought about that, when that happened, and people, were all kind of talking about, okay, well, where does this change? How does this change where you think he might go? Because I think there was a lot of first round talk before then. And I looked at a guy like Dayo Odeyingbo for the Colts last year. Dayo was a guy who I really liked coming out. And now he had his injury, back before the pro day. I want to say his was prior to the Senior Bowl.
It was in the season, I thought, because I liked him a lot too. Tough name to spell, but a great player, man.
And I don't even know if I pronounced it right. It's a very tough name to spell, and then probably, I butchered it, pronounced it, so I apologize to him. But just in terms of, okay, a guy who had talent, and I don't know that I would say anybody was projecting Dayo to go in the first. There might have been some people who were, but kind of that first, second round range. Ended up still going in the second round. Ended up still getting in some games, some snaps in the season. I think it was like week 8. I actually had to look this up recently. I think he came back around week 8 for the Colts. Again, different injury. I don't think his was an Achilles. It might have been, actually. I don't remember. But different time frame. Let's say that's one thing we do know for sure. Different time frame in terms of where the injury happened and then how long it took to recover. But the one thing that we've seen with EDC is that if he is comfortable with his knowledge and the information that he's getting from medical people about the injury, he'll still take a guy. We saw that with Hollywood. I mean, Hollywood had his Liz Frank, I want to say it was like February, had his surgery, and they still took him in the draft in April. So I think, there must have been something there where he was comfortable enough with the doctors, what the doctors were saying and kind of what his prognosis was and what his timetable for recovery was. Again, different injury. And certainly they've had experience with that with Jimmy. Jimmy had at least one Liz Frank. Maybe he had more than one. And then obviously now they're getting some experience with the Achilles, and they had it before, but most recently with Tybo, with Bowser. So I think it just depends on what kind of information they get. And again, that Michigan connection, so they'll probably be able to get really good information about what his prognosis is and what the timetable for recovery is. So if you look at him just as a player before he was injured and you say, look, you got this really twitchy pass rusher, the guy really loose, really fluid, very raw too. I mean, you probably know this, but very similar background to Odafe Owe. I mean, to the point of they went to the same high school, Blair Academy up there in Jersey, but very similar path to football, where guys were not, football wasn't necessarily their first sport, but then, they get to Blair Academy and get on the football team and just tear it up, right? And then become like instant sensations, get recruited by a whole bunch of people. Jabo, it happened the same way. And he literally talked about that. He's like, hey, I was there. Odafe was a year ahead of me. I saw what he did, and I was like, oh, I can do that. And he did it, and he got a bunch of offers and was able to get to Michigan. And when he got to Michigan, he said he just would watch guys like Kwity Paye, Josh Uche, and just try to mimic their moves, because he's like, I really was learning everything for the first time, and I would just watch those guys. And then me and Chris, you mentioned him earlier, we joked, it was like that thing in that movie Eternals. He's a deviant. He just copies stuff. He sees it and he copies it and he makes it his, and then he puts it out on the field. And it's like he'd see somebody do a spin move or do a cross chop or something in practice, and he just go out and do it on the field. And it's like, man, this guy hasn't even been playing that long. How does he know how to work these moves so efficiently? And
there was a show called Lions versus Hyenas where they tested this theory, where they let the rest of the hyenas watch the one hyena trying to get the food in the box or whatever it was, did the same thing for lions, and we're trying to figure out who could emulate the both. So off the show topic right there, but I love experiments like that. Yeah, I didn't see that movie, so that was my own personal reference of it.
But it's the same analogy. I mean, it's the same thing. It's the same concept. It works. So, I mean, getting back to your original question, because as you can tell, I can go way off the rails.
But we're in the dark, is what you're pretty much telling me. I mean, there's really, don't beat yourself over it. Don't beat yourself up over it, Jason. Is that kind of where you're going with this?
Yeah, I think if you initially moved him back to the second round, like maybe if you had him in the first, you were projecting him in the first, and maybe you moved him to second, I think that's still the right place. I don't think that he probably gets out of the second. If he gets out of the second, then I think that tells us more about what teams learned medically. Like maybe they have a little bit more concern about it. It's going to take a little bit longer, or maybe it's not, he's not at a point in the recovery where they feel like, or where they want him to be. And so that would be my takeaway if he were to get out of the second round, because I just look at some of these other guys who've had similar injuries that are going to take time for them to get back, and people still look at the talent that was there before the injury and say, well, yeah, we'll still take that guy in the second round. So I think if you did that, if that's where you have him at right now, I don't think that's a bad place to have him.
All right, cool. I'm glad to get your advice on that kind of stuff, but you have to rely on other people and your peers to kind of get yourself checked. You know what I mean? Check yourself. So, I mean, I'm going back and I'm watching McDuffie like a monster now. His tackling and everything else I've heard question. I'm like, well, this isn't the guy I've been watching, man. So, and also, Michael, I feel like James Ogden, yourself, and myself, we've been. I don't know, like if there's a secret spy amongst us, but I feel like our notes are really similar. As I've gotten to talk to both of you during the process.
Well, I think we see the game similarly, and even before James went to the scouting academy and I started reading his Red Star Baltimore blog, just the way that he wrote up players, the description, the words he used, I was like, we see the game similarly. And I think it's the same thing with you when I hear you talk about players or describe players and the words you use to describe them and the things that stand out to you when you watch them. We just see it similarly. Sometimes people just see the game in a similar way. And so they're probably always going to have a pretty similar pool of players that they like, just because we see that game. We see the game in such a similar way. And these guys are good players. So a lot of people probably see it the same way. But I'm with you on the McDuffie thing. I get, people that have an issue with the size, obviously, the short arms. I get all of that. And the amount of off coverage they played in that scheme. But to your point, you can't really hold scheme against these guys, right? They're there in college, they're doing what their coaches are asking them to do, and it doesn't mean that they can't do other things. They just weren't asked to do those things as much. But you can see man coverage reps of McDuffie, but you got to watch. It's in there, but you got to watch.
It's so hard, Michael. I mean, I watched the entire Michigan game and he wasn't targeted once, and I'm like, what the heck am I doing here? Like, I need a better method, or else I'm not going to be able to find any information on this guy.
If you saw that game, you saw one of those run plays away from him. He jacked some dude up in the run game and put him on the side.
It made the notes real quick. Quick. And then last night I talked to somebody where I'm like, he's like, oh, I see in the reports tackling's an issue for him. And I'm like, gosh darn it, Michael, how many more times do I got to go back and watch Trent McDuffie? But I say that in jest because I love the process, the unknown. I'm not a person that gets upset or defensive when I get it wrong. I understand I'm going to get it wrong sometimes. And I just love the unpredictability. As you mentioned, we don't get to talk to them. We don't get to talk to the coaches. Some of these young men had some issues in school or issues getting to practice. things that were kind of covered up, because you don't want that stuff getting out about your players. I mean, that's your players, and you want more players, and you owe it to respect to somebody that committed to you to try to take care of them behind the scenes and not put everything out on Front Street. So we don't have any idea. We don't know who's early to practice and who's the last man to practice. It is funny, I'll share this with you. I don't usually share this kind of stuff, especially in video, but I had somebody tell me that the Georgia coaches weren't too fond of Jermaine Johnson, and I'm thinking, I'm not paying that any mind, because he left them. He left them and showed out. Like, I could see there being some sour grapes in there. So you can't trust any kind of secondhand information, thirdhand information. You just gotta, for me, Michael, I just kind of simplify it and go by what I see on tape and try to take all the context clues into events. Like a guy like Daxton Hill shows me that he could play multiple positions. A guy like Zion Johnson, or Parham, we talked about today, the coaches must love him. John Paschal is another guy I talked about with Dev, who they couldn't take off the field at Kentucky. That tells me that the coaches love him. So, that's the kind of things that as years go by, you start to notice about certain players, because we sure as heck don't get to talk to them or know half of what goes on at the university.
No, and I think that's the part that everybody that does this as a hobby, a passion, however you want to describe it, is to keep that in mind and don't be too hard on yourself about that part, because you have to know going in that you are going to have an incomplete evaluation. I don't care how much film you watch. It's just going to be incomplete, because there's just information that we don't have. Not just the background and the medical stuff, but the stuff that you were alluding to, like what guys are doing in practice, even within the scheme. Like, do you know what a guy is really being asked to do on a particular play? And you look at something and you're like, oh, he busted. He made a mistake. Did he? Or did somebody else bust and make it? Like, if you don't have that stuff, of course it's going to be incomplete. And so it took me a while to really kind of put that in my head. Like, hey, man, look, you're doing this and you're missing so many pieces of the puzzle. So you're going to miss a lot. You're going to miss a lot more than you probably want to or feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
Kind of just baked into it. And so, you have to really kind of isolate it to, okay, on this play or these plays, when I see this thing, based on my understanding of what I think is going on here in the concept, this is what I see about the player. And I think if you do that, then you can always kind of hold yourself accountable to that, because you at least have that. And you say, okay, if I messed that up, then all right, I need to go back and look and see why I messed that up. But that's probably the most information that I'm going to have. And it's all kind of really based on my understanding of things. So you're always trying to learn. I know for me, always trying to learn more ball, trying to learn the game more, reading about the game, studying old playbooks, listening to coaching clinics, listening to people on Twitter. Obviously, there's just tons of football content and football information out there. And I'm not saying all of it is 100% accurate, but, there's a lot of coaches out there who are willing to give of their time and share their knowledge. And you can learn stuff just from following them and listening to the stuff they post or watching videos on YouTube or whatever. So all of that stuff's just going to help you be better. And then, of course, you go back. I try to do this, go back and look at guys where I feel like I was higher on them and then it hadn't quite worked out. Your Rashad Perrymans, your Kamala Correas of the world, where I try to go back and figure out,
Tim Williams
is of the world. Like, I will say, now people can search this. I'm not just putting it out there. You can go back and search Twitter. People love to search Twitter for things that people say. One thing I did think about Tim Williams was I thought he was a little stiff. I did not see a guy with a, people, look at the way he can bend the edge. I did not see a guy who's like a super bendy edge kind of guy. But at the same time, I'm also not going to sit here and say, I knew he was going to be out of the league in a couple years. I did not.
That has to do with the off-field stuff, you would have to assume, because a man with that kind of natural talent. But I needed you back there, MC, at that draft. I didn't know you at the time. We all need somebody to lean on, MC. I needed MC to lean on with my Tim Williams. And wise words from you, sir. I just want to reiterate a couple of things. You have Scouting Academy you can attend. Coaching clinics are always important. They're having one here in my high school, Dundalk High School. I don't know if you could ever give it any love. When you see me tweet it out, MC, give it a retweet. We got a 6'6" left tackle here. Went to the state championship game from our little school in, Southeast Baltimore County, right here on the city line. So go to your coaching clinics, go to an academy, listen to people that you trust. take that all into consideration. All the game is going to always evolve. If you are stuck in certain ways, you will get left behind in the evaluation process. Understand how things are changing, but in the end, MC, stick with your gut. Stick with your gut. When you got your McDuffie, and everybody's trying to tell you that McDuffie is a borderline first rounder, and you see him as an option around that 14 spot, just trust yourself on that. Don't let other people talk you out of what you kind of just have this feel for your own strengths that you can't. It's intangible, MC. You can't put words to it all the time, or why you like a player and see him working out. So I appreciate all them.
Talk about with this, like, hey, you got to stand on it. If you've done the work and you're comfortable with the work that you've done, and you start looking around and people are saying, nah, I don't agree with that. Nah, I don't think it's this. That's fine. I'm not saying disregard all of that. Listen to it, but you got to trust your own eyes at the end of the day. And then, like you said, you can always look back afterwards in a couple of years. And if it doesn't quite go the way you thought it was, that's the thing that you really want to try to learn from. But as you're going through that process, I think one of the things I've really had to learn to do is don't listen to a bunch of other voices. Do your own eval first, because there's some stuff that can get in there if you watch what other people are saying or read what other people are saying.
Yes, it affects you bias. It affects your internal bias. You're not even aware of it. James said the same thing. I'm the same way. I try to watch at least one full game or 1.5 parts of 2 games. And then I start to say, well, let me match it up with like a Jeremiah or a Lance Zierlein or a Michael Crawford, and just see what they have to say about it. You know what I mean? What am I missing?
You get all. I'm not anywhere close to those guys, Lee.
You like how I slid you in there, right?
I appreciate that. It's very nice of you, but I will tell your listeners, you should never try to match up anything to anything that I say or do. If anything, do the opposite, and you're probably going to be better off.
How about Mr. Aguilera? Mr. Aguilera? Can I put you in Chris's class?
Well, now Chris is above me for sure. You should definitely listen to him. Because the thing I love about Chris is that thing that you mentioned a second ago. Sometimes you have a feel for players and the feel for watching players. You can't quite put it into words, but you have a feel. And I'm not saying he doesn't do a good job putting things into words. He does. But he sees things and gets a feel for players so quick. And I'm like slow to catch up. Him and Kerry are like so much faster than that. I'm like, oh, okay, now I see it. But he sees it so fast. And then it's like, yeah, he's right. So definitely listen to him. Definitely listen to Jason. I mean, all those things that you mentioned with clinics and stuff like that. Watch Huddle Up Films. That's going to help you get smarter. That's going to help you learn more about ball.
Thank you, Michael. That's why I make those clips, is because if you see enough of one person doing the same thing over and over again, you start to notice both the good and the bad. And I even told people who are just starting out, trying to analyze the draft, they have this fear of the highlights because they don't want to be the guy who watches the highlights and all you watch highlights. But I can tell you, Michael, when I see we'll pick out receiver, for example. If I'm watching a receiver's highlights and everything he's catching, I see 7 touchdowns on go balls and he had 8 touchdowns on the season. It automatically makes me question his route running. Like, okay, this guy's all his stats, or a sack, a guy who gets sacks. I noticed with Paschal, 3 of his 5 sacks came in garbage time against not a good school. So I'm like, well, okay, that 5 sacks is a little bit deceiving. So you can take negatives out of the highlights. Sure. And it's not just all hype. You can see his speed in the open field and be like, yes, he's not a breakaway guy, but that doesn't mean everything, but it's not all pump him up. You can be very skeptical. And a lot of times at the beginning, when I'm just relaxed and having a good time, I like to just watch the highlights of the top guys and get a feel for what they look like when they're going well. So yeah, that's kind of a personal thing of mine.
You can take something out of anything. That's what I try. Like, I don't like, because to me, that's too rigid. The people say, well, don't watch highlights, or you can't only watch the TV copy. You need the coach's film. You need all 22. I mean, for some things, it certainly helps. Don't get me wrong. Those angles certainly help, and you can see different things that you can't see from maybe the broadcast angle, or you're not going to see, maybe some plays that aren't as good as the ones that you see in the highlights. I get all of that. But you can take something from everything if you understand how to parse information, the stuff that you're seeing, and say, okay, let me take this and say, okay, like you said, maybe it's a critical play. And you say, maybe that's be a little bit deceptive. Maybe that's a little bit out of context there. Or it could even be a good thing, where you look at some of the things in the highlights that they're doing well, and you go back and maybe you do have an opportunity to see coach's film, and you're like, hey, this is still showing up here too. in the other place.
Yes.
So it's not necessarily a negative thing. I think where it can get you in trouble is if you only have one source of information. If you got multiple sources, I think you can take a little bit from everything. It's just, learning what is value and what isn't value when you take it away. But yeah, I don't have anything against people who look at highlights. I mean, shit, I watch to this day. I'm still watching. What's his name? A man out of West Virginia. It's real Austin.
Austin, yeah. Man, he's still in the league. I think he's still in the league, Michael.
Yeah. So I mean, look. Sometimes you just. I mean, look at the bottom, at the heart of all of this is supposed to be fun, right? We like the game. We like watching the game because it's fun. So it's fun watching highlights, So I mean, like, I don't have a problem, but there's, like I said, there's a place, there's a context for it. Like if you're doing an evaluation, okay, there's a context for it. But if you're just, like chilling or whatever, having fun, hey, I just want to get a quick look at something. Yeah.
That's how I start my process. Nice and relaxed before I get all like in my own head and thinking. I'm like, let me check out Thibodeau's sacks. Let me see Thibodeau's highlights. Let me get let me get a chance to see him in his form. My only complaint with highlights, Michael, they don't have our music in there, man. They don't have our music in there anymore. We're relegated to car commercials and halftime shows. At least we had the halftime show, MC.
Oh, it took us back. It took me, people like me and you back. Maybe some, my son, he's 15, he's watching it. He's like, what are these songs? But he'd heard some of them, but he was like, these songs are trash. And I said, see, that's the difference, right? That's the difference right there. You don't fully appreciate this music for what it is, what it still is to this day. So it was cool seeing that, man. That was fun. And I think it got so much buzz that I hope they keep doing stuff like that.
Yeah.
So.
Hey, I'm looking for an alt rock band from the 90s to come out and show out and bring that kind of mosh pit energy, grunge, gangster rap, alt rock, nice. R&B of that era. I mean, that's still my stuff. Hate being the stubborn old man on this, MC, but 90s music, late 80s to early 2000s music. I mean, you talk about seeing the board the same, seeing the NFL the same. Me and you, I think we're long lost, like brothers, cousins, something like that, man. And one other thing, MC, I missed this at the beginning, man. You actually have inspired me in life. One physical time, you post the pictures of yourself with the fire pit. Okay.
Yeah.
Now I'm also a fire pit enthusiast. So that one time I seen your fire and I said, blanket, I'm going outside, start my own bleepity bleep fire. And it's going to look just like Michael's. And I'm going to sit out here. And that's what I need to do. So when I say stuff like you inspire me because like MC, you actually, I meant to tell you that you actually inspired me to make a fire with a fire pit tweet. Put that on your resume, sir.
I appreciate that. It's very kind of you to say, but yeah, I am team fire pit all the way. I'm not limited to any season with the fire pit. I'll do it anytime. I feel like there's a little bit of chill in the air. Sometimes it looks summer, it's a little hot, but it's not always about the heat thing. It's about the vibe. There's just something about that energy, that fire pit energy, where you're sitting out there, you got the fire going, you got the smoke, maybe you got a little something in your hand, got the music playing. The kids obviously love it. Well, at least my daughter, she's 10. She's still into it. My son, he'll come out there and be like, all right, later. But yeah, I'm a big, hang out by the fire pit kind of guy. So hey, look, team fire pit, man, it's growing every day. We keep building that thing.
All right, Michael, at this time, we're going to cut us off because we could talk all day between me and you and James. By the way, James is more talkative than both of us. So put together. So that man, I've had so much fun on this show. Hopefully, MC, if I can get you back closer to the draft and do one more of these things, that would be great. And I'm trying to get on that deep cover pod too, man. I'm trying to sneak in.
We got to make it happen. We were close recently. I guess it's a little bit for folks how the sausage is made. I won't put my man out there, but we were close recently and just had some technical difficulties. But we're gonna make it happen, man. There's no question.
Yeah, his internet went out. No, I see you. I see you, CA. I know what's up, man.
You see some of those pictures you've been posting. You see some of those pictures you've been posting about the people we be going out with. So I don't know if that was the internet or something else was going on, but
something was connected. Some connection missing. I'm not sure. Not sure how else to phrase that. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye to my football family. Thank you to my football family. Check out Michael. Check out his stuff below. And thanks for the great conversation. MC, it's time to say goodbye to the people now.
All right. Hey, y'all be good out there. Take care of each other. And it was fun, Jason. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate you.